Many times I have thought about monetization in games and how there's always a contrast between publishers and players. Publishers want to charge more and more for their games, first upfront, and then extra content, DLCs, character skins, and so on. On the other hand, players want everything to be free or as cheap as possible. They don't want to spend more after they have purchased a game. They don't want to keep spending more and more, even if it's years down the line. They want new updates and more content and bug fixing for as long as the game exists. And the problem gets bigger when we're talking about live games or MMOs, because the servers have to be fed with more content and patches and new seasons and a lot of more things. And that has always bothered me because I am a developer, but also I'm a player. And as a player, I want my game to be functional in 2086 running Windows 30. I want hardware compatibility. I always want to be able to play my game no matter when, no matter where. But as a developer, I know that none of those things come free. Everything has a cost. Everything needs a team dedicated to that, working endlessly to fix bugs, to add more content, to polish a certain amount of content. Everything needs to be planned and scheduled and accounted for. They need time and resources. In games that I'm working on right now, we have a full backlog of bugs that we need to fix over time while we develop more content and new updates and further projects, everything at the same time. How to find an equilibrium so that players and developers are satisfied. Hence, monetization. Hey guys, it's Harry. I've been a game designer and producer for the past 11 years, and today we're going to touch on the subject of monetization, both from the developer perspective as well as the player. This is going to be an interesting conversation to you, no matter if you are one or the other. Actually, we're all players, right? Developers want to make and play amazing games. That's why we do what we do. That's why we pursue this career. That's why I'm talking to you guys right now, because I love games and I love game development. So if you love it as well, leave some love. Leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with one other friend, and they have to do the same so I can create kind of a pyramid scheme out of YouTube videos. But anyway, here we go. Monetization. In a nutshell, we call monetization the systems inside a game that allows players to purchase any kinds of items directly from the game itself. Or more broadly, when we are saying that a game is either a premium game or free to play, we are talking about the revenue models. And this is also monetization. It's all part of the loop. It's the path from the player engaging with the game in any way to the player spending money on that game, be it purchasing directly or via in-app purchases like items, skins, DLCs, and so on. Back in the day, this wasn't a thing. A game was seen as a physical product like any other, like a pair of shoes that you can purchase and own. It's yours. You have the physical media. You do whatever you want with it. Using the internet to download patches and updates for your game was something very infrequent in the 80s and 90s. Then came Steam in 2003, and the consoles followed the trend later on, so you could have a digital distribution of the games, purchase the game digitally, and with time it became standard to get online updates that could add new content or fix bugs. Steam started with Valve's own games like Half-Life and Counter-Strike, but then it opened up doors to external developers until it became the digital behemoth that it is today. What that meant is that instead of moving on to other projects that would be sold under a premium model, like a physical product, companies needed to keep developers working on that game for a longer period of time, meaning more costs, and a need to justify those costs somehow, of course, with more revenue. Many times you would hope that adding more free content to the game could by itself incentivize more people to also buy the game. But more often than not, you would need some new revenue stream out of the same title in order to get more profits. And when we say profit, we means not losing money and staying in business. For most developers throughout history, that is what profit means, not sports cars or a trip to Thailand. What I think we need for developers and players to be aligned on is to find a monetization model that players are actually happy to engage with, to spend money on. That has happened to me several times over. I love collectible card games, and in particular Gwent, the Witcher card game. I think it's a fantastic game. I played that a lot. To me, it was the best card game out there, and I loved playing, watching streams and tournaments, and spending money for more content so I could create new and better decks and upgrade my characters. Yes, I could play the game over and over to get more of the soft currency without having to spend money. But being an adult, I have other responsibilities and I do have some disposable income that I can use on my hobbies. And that's how I see it. It's a hobby instead of a physical single product that I own. So I was happy to spend money on Gwent stuff. A lot I could purchase and then reuse to get new cards later on, so it didn't feel like something that would vanish after the first use. Also, I could get new maps and skins for my character that would permanently enhance my experience, so great. It didn't feel pay to win at all to me, which is an important part of this loop, the player's perception of fairness. But then, unfortunately, Gwent stopped receiving constant updates and support, and those super cool live events that used to be held were abandoned, because financially it wasn't being justified for the publisher's CD Projekt Red. When you have those live games, especially from bigger companies, you need to have much more aggressive monetization, and the player base needs to grow continuously. Otherwise it doesn't justify the costs, and many times the projects will be left behind. Same thing happened with another card game, Legends of Runeterra, this time from Riot Games, the developer and publisher of League of Legends. At the time, Runeterra's monetization system was actually considered too light by part of its own community, not aggressive enough, so after a point, it wasn't making enough revenue to justify the continued support. So how do we find a balance here? If the monetization system is too aggressive, then that's bad for the players, and you see a lot of toxic monetization practices, especially on mobile, where the companies make heavy use of some basic psychology and addiction techniques to keep players hooked and spending more money. And it's actually not that hard when you think about it. Humans are animals, and in a certain way we are forever children. We like splashy stuff, a splash of colors and movement and light flashing on the screen, and we love being patted on the back and told we are amazing, the best of all, yes! And when a game does that well enough, especially with a more casual audience, which, let's face, it's most people on Earth, then they are hooked and they will continue to spend money on a game. Or even worse, there are the whales, a small number of people that pay absurd amounts of money on items in a game so they can feel good and superior to others. So you create the system of addiction, bragging rights, of exploitation of primitive human psychology, not to provide the most fun for the player, but to drive frustration in them and a sense of being left behind. That is the worst possible outcome. I don't want to make a game to leave my players feeling frustrated and to spend money because they are locked in it. They feel like it's a drug. I want players to be spending money on my game because they are excited about it, because they want to support the game and support the community and the developers, and they want to see more of that content so that they can continue playing the game in a sustainable relationship with the developers. Games are fabulous artifacts. They can engage you like almost nothing else in life. They can make you feel powerful or vulnerable. They can make you cry of joy, or they can move you with a deep story and strong characters. Games can do so much. But for that sustainable relationship to happen, we need to talk. We need players and developers talking to each other. We need transparency. We need communities discussing the games and the practices behind them. We need developers to understand players and how they want to spend supporting the games they love. And we need players understanding how development works, understanding that nothing is free, everything has a cost. And if you don't find a sustainable way to support the developers, then big and exploitative companies will find more aggressive ways to achieve that. That's the way things go. How many times have I seen those crappy Instagram ads showing games that actually don't play nothing like the ad? They are completely different games. They just want to grab you, and deceive you. And they show you ads when you're playing the game. They are showing you ads every 30 seconds. It's a mess. And when you look at the reviews, players are frustrated because of that, giving low rates to the game. But because of the well-placed marketing strategies, more players keep coming in and revenue keeps dropping on the company's accounts. You might not realize it, but that's a crazy big market, and a lot of companies make big bucks out of that. Which is awful. That's not the relationship we want between developers and players at all. Most developers out there, most engineers and designers and artists working in games, they love games. They love seeing players excited to engage with something they have worked so hard on. But when good studios don't find ways to monetize and sustain themselves, they rely on worse practices to stay in business. If they don't do that, then other studios with bad practices will prevail, and a lot of times they are going to acquire the others. How many articles have I seen the last few years of one bigger company acquiring another? This leaves fewer players that are independent and trying to do something new, creating a sustainable relationship with the players. So what's the solution? Once again, players and developers need to talk. Strong communities prevail over weak ones. I'm a big advocate for open and transparent development, where developers know they are building something players love, and they are always communicating that and asking the players about it. I think the games industry has been overly secretive on the projects being made and the progress throughout the years. Maybe if you're talking about bigger companies, it's kinda understandable and it makes sense to be more conservative with sharing information, especially on bigger IPs. But if you're a small or even a mid-sized studio, I would advise against keeping too much for yourselves for too long. I have seen so many studios and so many projects fail to conduct frequent playtests and ask for feedback from their players. So in a 3-year development cycle, the company hides the project behind walls for the first 2 years, and only after beta, they start to showcase the game to more people and allow people to get their hands on it. But after beta, it's already too late to find out that actually players hate your game, or they don't like the story or certain core aspects of the experience. After beta, it gets hard and expensive to change some fundamental elements of the game. Open development can change that, and one great way for players to help with that process is to engage more frequently with social media and communities and directly to developers, but not simply to say that you hate something or that something's crap, but to let developers know that you love something or that you would be much more excited about this other thing. Believe me when I say that a lot of developers are eager to hear what players would love to see in a game, or what next game they would love to play from that company. It is much more helpful for you as a player to tell your favorite developers what you would love, than to say that you hate something without being too specific. Of course, every piece of feedback is appreciated. Of course, it's important for the studios to know that players are not satisfied with something, but engaging on a more positive note helps establish that open and transparent communication with one another. I have lost count of the times where my teams would constantly be looking at the communities and trying to actively listen to the players to release something that had higher chances of success. That is only logical, right? Because one of the main things, if not the main thing, that can cause developers to not listen to players is executive pressure. People with big money having a different agenda. And usually when you have those big conglomerates with several studios under their umbrella, they are too far detached from the players and the communities, paying more attention to the spreadsheets and fiscal year reports. But those are the people with money, and games require tons of money to be made, even mid-sized games. At least a few $1 million, and we're shooting low. The same is true for films, for example. The first Deadpool film didn't have a lot of support from the publishers, and it got only $60 million for its full production. For a big feature film, that's low. That was the message sent that they didn't believe in the film and they didn't want to risk it. Naturally, after grossing more than $780 million back, things changed. But the same applies here for games. So most studios that are not incredibly small depend on the financing of bigger corporations, investors, or publishers. And you know the drill. Those who have the money make the rules. Maybe if there's one positive thing about this whole AI development in games is that the cost of production can be reduced a lot, especially for smaller studios. And who knows, they might not be so reliant on external funding. The takeaway from this video that I want you to know is that you should try to stick together with your favorite studios and support them as much as you can. Be vocal for both the positive and the negative, but building and engaging with those communities is incredibly important and cannot be overstated. A lot of the best developers rely on that. It's easy to TikTok your way out of Steam or any of the console platforms and scroll endlessly through pages and pages of different games. And that's great, there's nothing wrong with that. But if you're more actively engaged with your best studios, you may end up having better games at the end, more suited to your tastes, and more importantly, with better monetization practices, because now developers and players are in agreement instead of in dispute. Call me a dreamer, but I do think that my big goal here with the channel is to bridge the gap between developers and players, make them understand each other a little bit more, be more in sync, having important conversations. After all, wouldn't you feel much better if you knew that your favorite games are created by people who actually care? Well, a lot of them do care. You're just not talking to each other. If I can, I want to help change that. And I've seen throughout my career some great studios being shut down because they couldn't keep up with the business. And it's a business. So if people don't see the dollars coming in and falling to their accounts, it's not sustainable. It's not sustainable no matter how good or passionate they are. And I do want to make sure that the best people stay in business, because the alternative is that they don't. Well, that's it for today. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, and leave a comment below telling us what are your favorite studios and games. Let's make sure to support them. And I'll catch you guys next time.